When a man stretches his hand against a woman marked by God's purpose, he imagines he is dealing with flesh and emotion, but he is standing before decree and destiny. He thinks he is correcting her, controlling her, silencing her, or breaking her spirit, yet he does not realize that what he touches is guarded by the will of God. God does not choose people for decoration. God chooses vessels for demonstration. And when a vessel is struck, heaven records the impact. God is not moved by noise, but God is moved by injustice. God does not rush to defend pride, but God rises to defend purpose. What a man calls discipline, God may call desecration. What a man calls authority, God may call rebellion against divine order. And when that line is crossed, the consequences do not sleep. A chosen woman is not chosen because she is flawless. She is chosen because God has planted something eternal within her. She carries assignments that speak before she opens her mouth. She carries insight that disturbs systems built on fear. She carries endurance that outlives storms meant to drown her. When a man wounds her, he wounds more than her feelings. He wounds the future God intended to unfold through her obedience. God sees the tears that fall in silence. God hears the prayers she cannot fish. God reads the questions she is afraid to ask aloud. And God, who measures time differently than men, never forgets a debt written in pain. Do not misunderstand this truth. God is not impressed by power that bruises. God is not honored by strength that humiliates. God is not glorified by leadership that feeds on submission without compassion. God establishes authority to protect life, not to crush it. When a man uses his position, his voice, or his influence to diminish a woman chosen by God, he is not exercising authority. He is exposing insecurity. And insecurity is loud, but it is never lasting. God resists the proud, not with arguments, but with outcomes. God does not shout warnings. God allows consequences to preach. There are wounds that do not bleed in public, yet they cry out before God. There are scars hidden beneath smiles that testify in heaven. A chosen woman may fall silent, but her silence is not weakness, it is restraint. It is God teaching her how to survive what would have destroyed someone else. God trains his chosen ones in places men do not see. While a man believes he has broken her, God is deepening her roots. While a man believes he has diminished her worth, God is refining her vision. While a man believes he has ended her voice, God is preparing an echo that will travel further than his influence ever could. God has a way of turning private cruelty into public lessons. God does not rush to expose, but when God reveals, the revelation is complete. The same hands that caused pain will one day search for peace and not find it. The same voice that spoke harshly will one day plead and go unheard. This is not revenge, this is order. God governs the universe with balance. What is sown in arrogance is harvested in humility. What is planted in cruelty grows into regret. God does not need to defend himself. God allows truth to mature until it cannot be denied. A chosen woman is dangerous to injustice because she survives it without becoming it. She does not need to become bitter to become strong. She does not need to curse to be covered. God teaches her how to stand without shouting and how to endure without disappearing. When she rises, it is not to prove a point. It is to fulfill an assignment. And when she walks forward, it is not toward revenge, it is toward obedience. God lifts her, not to embarrass those who hurt her, but to demonstrate that divine purpose cannot be assassinated by human cruelty. Men who hurt chosen women often believe time will erase accountability. They believe apologies spoken too late will undo damage done too deeply. They believe moving on means being released. But God is not bound by calendars. God is not distracted by success. God does not confuse prosperity with approval. God watches patterns. God weighs intentions. God listens to how power is used when no one is watching. And when judgment comes, it often arrives quietly in the form of unrest, loss of peace, confusion of direction, and a slow realization that something essential has slipped away. Yet even here, God remains just. God's desire is not destruction, but repentance. God warns before he corrects. God convicts before he exposes. God allows moments for reflection, chances for humility, doors for restoration. But when those moments are ignored, when arrogance hardens into habit, when cruelty becomes identity, then God allows life itself to respond. No one outruns God by speed or status. No one hides from God behind titles or tradition. God searches the heart, and the heart cannot lie forever. To the woman who has been wounded, hear this truth deeply. Your value was not reduced by what you endured. Your calling was not cancelled by what you survived. Your future is not delayed because someone misunderstood your worth. God specializes in restoration that does not look like the past. God rebuilds with stronger foundations. God returns joy with wisdom attached. God restores dignity without erasing memory so that you walk forward alert, not afraid. The same God who allowed the trial will also author the testimony. And the testimony will carry authority because it was born in truth. God is raising women who will no longer beg for permission to exist. God is awakening voices that were once silenced by fear. God is strengthening hearts that learn to beat steadily under pressure. These women will not mirror the pain they endured, they will transform it. They will build what they were denied. They will protect what they were once blamed for. And they will do it without bitterness because God has taught them how to forgive without forgetting who teach. Heya. When a man hurts a chosen woman, he sets in motion a chain of events he cannot control. God begins to rearrange seasons. God begins to shift alliances. God begins to expose motives. And while it may seem slow, it is precise. God does not miss details. God does not miscalculate timing. God does not overlook tears shed in secret. Every wound has a witness. Every injustice has a record. Every prayer whispered in the dark has already been answered in ways still unfolding. So let every heart examine itself. Let power be handled with humility. Let strength be clothed in mercy. Let authority be exercised with fear of God, not confidence in self. Because when God chooses someone, He invests Himself in their journey. And touching what God has chosen without reverence is never a small thing. God remains sovereign. God remains watchful. God remains faithful to His purpose. And that purpose will stand, rising quietly, steadily, irresistibly. Even as the story continues to unfold, there is a spiritual law that many overlook. God defends what He designs. When a woman is chosen by God, her life is not random. Her sensitivity is not weakness. And her endurance is not accidental. She is shaped by God's hand to carry weight others would collapse under. When a man wounds her, thinking her softness makes her vulnerable, he misreads the source of her strength. Her resilience does not come from tolerance of pain, but from trust in God. And God does not ignore those who misuse strength against what He has refined. God watches not only actions, but the posture of the heart behind them. A man may say, I did not know she was chosen. But ignorance does not cancel responsibility. God places signs everywhere, wisdom in her words, restraint in her reactions, grace in her endurance, clarity in her convictions. These are not common traits. They are marks of divine preparation. To harm such a woman is to disregard the fingerprints of God. And when fingerprints are ignored, accountability follows. God does not ask permission to intervene. God does not wait for consensus. God steps in when purpose is threatened. There is a reason chosen women often face resistance before recognition. Darkness always reacts when light enters a room. God allows opposition not to weaken His chosen, but to reveal who they truly are. Pressure exposes character. Conflict exposes intent. And when a man chooses to hurt instead of honor, God allows His own nature to be revealed in time. God does not rush exposure, because delayed truth carries greater weight. When revelation comes, it speaks louder than accusation ever could. Understand this, God never abandons His chosen in pain. Even when she feels alone, she is never uncovered. God may allow the wound, but He controls the death. God may permit the storm, but He limits its duration. Every tear she sheds waters something that will grow later. Every silent prayer becomes a foundation stone in a future she cannot yet see. God wastes nothing, not pain, not waiting, not disappointment. Everything is woven into purpose. When a man hurts a chosen woman, God often shifts the battlefield from confrontation to consequence. God does not argue, God arranges. Doors begin to close quietly. Favor becomes inconsistent. Peace becomes elusive. Direction becomes unclear. The man may continue outwardly, but inwardly he is unsettled. This is not coincidence. This is correction. God does not always strike suddenly. Sometimes He removes stability gradually so the heart is forced to reflect. God prefers repentance over ruin, but repentance must be chosen. Chosen women often struggle with self-blame after being hurt. They ask what they did wrong, why they tolerated too much, why they stayed silent too long. But God does not shame His chosen, God heals them. God teaches them discernment through experience. God sharpens their wisdom through survival. What once confused them will later protect them. What once broke them will later guide others. God transforms wounds into wells from which others will drink understanding. There is also a warning here for those who observe but remain silent. God sees not only the hand that strikes, but the eyes that look away. Silence in the presence of injustice is not neutrality, it is alignment. God calls His people to protect what He values. When a chosen woman is mistreated, heaven watches who speaks, who acts, and who hides behind comfort. God remembers courage. God remembers cowardice. And God responds accordingly. A chosen woman does not need validation from the one who hurt her. God Himself becomes her witness. God becomes her defender. God becomes her restorer. When God lifts her, it will not be because she demanded it, but because she endured with faith. Her elevation will not come with noise, but with authority. Her presence will carry weight because it has been tested. And those who once dismissed her will recognize too late that God was with her all along. God is teaching this generation that calling is not gendered, but purpose-driven. God entrusts weighty assignments to those who can carry them with humility. Many chosen women are entrusted with discernment, compassion, and strength because God knows they will steward power without corruption. When men try to dominate instead of partner, they resist God's design. God never intended strength to compete with strength. God designed strength to complement wisdom. Let this truth settle deeply. No pain inflicted on a chosen woman goes unnoticed. No tear is unseen. No prayer is unheard. God records everything, not to punish impulsively, but to judge righteously. And God's judgment is always precise. It does not miss the guilty, and it does not confuse the innocent. God separates truth from narrative, intention from excuse, and power from abuse. And still, God remains merciful. Even to those who have caused harm, God offers a path back through humility, to acknowledge wrong, to seek forgiveness sincerely, to change behavior consistently. These things matter to God. But pride blocks mercy. Excuses delay healing. And denial invites discipline. God cannot heal what is defended. God cannot restore what is justified. God waits for truth to be acknowledged before grace can fully flow. As this story continues, know that God is not finished. The chosen woman's chapter does not end with pain. It deepens with purpose. Her life will speak louder than the harm done to her. Her future will testify to God's faithfulness. And the lesson will stand as a warning and a witness. Touching what God has chosen without reverence carries a cost. But honoring what God has chosen releases blessing that extends far beyond a single life. Do you feel the weight of this truth? Every chosen woman carries more than dreams. She carries destiny. Every trial she endures is not random. It is God's refining fire. When a man strikes her, underestimates her, or attempts to suppress her, he is touching what is invested with heaven's authority. God does not respond with noise or anger alone. God responds with precision, timing, and restoration. A wound inflicted on her is not just flesh deep. It is a challenge to divine order. And God will respond in ways that human eyes cannot yet see. Many fail to understand that God protects His chosen, not by shielding them from adversity, but by empowering them within it. She may appear vulnerable, she may appear silent, but God is working in secret to build what cannot be destroyed. Every insult, every betrayal, every act of cruelty becomes a tool in God's hands to strengthen, to sharpen, and to awaken her purpose. Pain becomes perspective, and suffering becomes insight. A chosen woman does not break easily because she rests on the foundation of God's wisdom, and no man, no circumstance, no injustice can overturn that foundation without divine allowance. God raises witnesses, not by chance, but by design. Those who oppress, humiliate, or harm the chosen will often find that the world around them begins to change quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. Doors they once believed were open may close. Trust they relied upon may vanish. Influence they assumed was secure may crumble. God does not always act with immediate drama, but with unerring accuracy. The one who thought they could diminish what God chose will discover that their actions have only accelerated their exposure. God is not vindictive, but God is vigilant, and God's justice is meticulous. And while God orchestrates correction, God also nurtures restoration. A chosen woman learns endurance without bitterness, strength without arrogance, and courage without aggression. She becomes a vessel for purpose, not for vengeance. God teaches her to navigate the world with grace and discernment, to recognize what is aligned with divine intention, and to reject what is rooted in pride and selfishness. Her testimony becomes her authority, her obedience becomes her shield, and her survival becomes a lesson to all who attempt to underestimate the power of God's choice. Consider this: the wounds inflicted on the chosen are never wasted. They are recorded, transformed, and returned as wisdom that shapes others. God teaches her patience when correction is needed, discernment when deceit is present, and humility when triumph arrives. Every moment of hurt becomes a chapter in a story that carries influence far beyond the initial injustice. She may have been targeted for weakness, but God transforms her into a demonstration of strength, integrity, and divine order. Those who harm the chosen often act from fear, ignorance, or selfishness, not understanding that they are not confronting flesh and emotion. They are confronting God's authority manifested in human form. Every harsh word, every dismissive act, every attempt to control or diminish is cataloged in heaven. And when the appointed time comes, God ensures that reality aligns with His decree. He restores honor, elevates the faithful, and balances every wrong with justice that cannot be corrupted. Those who inflicted pain will encounter consequences, and they will understand far too late that the hand they raised was against more than human strength, it was against God's design. And so, the chosen woman moves forward, not with fear, not with anger, but with divine clarity. She understands her value, knows her assignment, and walks in obedience to God alone. The trials she endured become a testimony, a witness to the world that God's will cannot be thwarted by cruelty or arrogance. Her life becomes a message, her presence a sign, and her legacy a lesson to all who would ever doubt. To oppose what God has chosen. Pain is temporary, but purpose is eternal. Hurt is fleeting, but God's plan is immutable. And while men may believe they have rewritten her story, God alone remains the author. And the story unfolds according to His perfect wisdom. Every act of injustice against her teaches a profound spiritual truth. God's chosen are never alone, never unprotected, and never without divine direction. Even when she feels abandoned, God is present. Even when the world misunderstands, God is her witness. Even when pain threatens to silence her, God gives her a voice that commands attention, not through aggression, but through righteousness and obedience. And when she rises, it will be a rise that cannot be ignored, a rise that cannot be overshadowed, a rise that proclaims, silently but powerfully, that God's choice is invincible. Those who hurt the chosen may think the battle is theirs, but the battlefield belongs to God. They may believe their influence will suppress, their words will diminish, and their cruelty will define. But they are merely moving pieces on a board they cannot control. God guides every turn. God secures every outcome. And the one who was wounded emerges not broken, not bitter, but stronger, wiser, and ready to complete what God assigned her to do. God's protection is not always visible, but it is always effective. God's justice is not always immediate, but it is always accurate. God's plans cannot be thwarted by human cruelty, arrogance, or ignorance. A chosen woman may cry, she may struggle, she may appear fragile, but she carries divine power, divine authority, and divine purpose. And anyone who tries to undermine her will soon discover that God's choice cannot be undone. Pain inflicted without regard for God's design always returns as testimony. Arrogance exercised without submission to God always invites correction. Every attempt to harm what God has chosen ultimately serves God's plan, not the one who seeks to dominate. And in that unfolding, the chosen woman learns, grows, and fulfills a destiny far beyond what human hands could imagine. God's chosen are invincible in ways the world cannot comprehend, and the consequences of hurting them extend far beyond immediate sight. Do you want me to continue building the speech to complete the full 5,000 plus words in this same unstoppable, faith-driven, and spiritually commanding style. This is where it starts becoming a truly epic, sermon-like masterpiece. Listen carefully, because this truth will pierce every layer of pretense. When a man harms a chosen woman, he's challenging not her flesh, not her fleeting emotions, but the hand of God itself. Every act of cruelty is recorded, every intention weighed, and every effect measured against divine purpose. God does not allow the chosen to suffer without significance. Every insult is a tool for refining patience, every betrayal a lesson in discernment, and every act of injustice a setup for testimony. What men believe is damage is actually a chapter in a story. God is writing a story that will glorify Him and expose what is false. There is a deeper wisdom here. Chosen women carry authority that is unseen yet undeniable. When a man hurts her, he may feel temporary satisfaction, a fleeting sense of control, but God's authority within her is eternal. Her worth is not defined by the actions of those who misjudge her. Her calling is not hindered by those who attempt to limit her. The power that flows through her comes from God, not approval, not recognition, not permission. And when that power awakens, the impact reaches far beyond personal boundaries. It reshapes environments, corrects injustices, and shifts hearts. God places His strength within those He chooses so that they can accomplish what human strength alone could never do. Every chosen woman has been tested not to break her, but to show her the depth of her strength and the height of her calling. Pain is temporary, yes, but preparation is eternal. God allows confrontation, opposition, and even deceit so that she may rise with clarity and courage. She does not need to fight with anger because God fights with precision. She does not need to justify herself to the world because God has already justified her in heaven. And those who hurt her will eventually see that the consequences of their actions cannot be avoided. God moves in ways that the world cannot measure and the crowd cannot anticipate. Think of this. God often allows hardship to reveal character. A chosen woman endures injustice and emerges refined, while the one who inflicted it is revealed for what he truly is. Strength without wisdom will falter. Pride without humility will crumble. Cruelty without conscience will return upon the one who wields it. God's design is never violated, and His justice never delayed beyond what is necessary for the lesson to mature. And when that lesson unfolds, it speaks louder than accusation, louder than argument, louder than human reasoning. The chosen woman is also a teacher in her own right. She learns discernment where others remain naive. She learns patience where others become frustrated. She learns integrity where others compromise. Her experiences, though painful, are being transformed into wisdom. God does not waste suffering, and He does not waste tears. Every moment of hurt becomes a building block for authority. Every trial a step toward influence. Every moment of endurance a platform for impact. She becomes a living testament that God's purpose cannot be hindered by human cruelty. Men who attempt to harm chosen women often think they are asserting control, but they are exposing weakness. God uses their actions to separate pride from truth, cruelty from justice, and arrogance from wisdom. The world may not see it immediately, but God's orchestration is precise. The same hands that strike in ignorance may later search for influence and find it gone. The same voice that shouted commands may later plead and find no audience. God is patient, but God is unyielding in protecting what He has chosen. Divine purpose cannot be obstructed by human intent. And here is a truth that cannot be overstated. Chosen women do not rise by imitation, by force, or by reaction. They rise through obedience to God's plan. Their response to harm is not vengeance but discernment. Their courage is not confrontation but alignment with divine will. Their authority is not claimed, it is recognized because it is rooted in something far greater than personal ambition. Every man who inflicts harm is unknowingly participating in God's refining process. Every act of injustice becomes part of the preparation for a greater demonstration of divine strength, wisdom, and resilience. God is teaching that life is not about avoidance of pain, but about the mastery of purpose. A chosen woman is a vessel. She may bend, but she will not break. She may stumble, but she will not fall beyond the scope of God's protection. She may cry in silence, but her tears are never wasted. And when she moves forward, she does so with a force that is unstoppable, not because of human power, but because God's authority flows through her. Those who once underestimated her will witness a presence that cannot be ignored, a voice that cannot be silenced, and a spirit that cannot be subdued. The chosen woman's path is also a warning to those who wield power without reverence. God honors responsibility, humility, and justice. God punishes misuse of strength, arrogance, and cruelty. Every word spoken in malice, every action intended to wound, every attempt to diminish God's choice carries consequence. And these consequences may not always be immediate, but they are inevitable. God orchestrates events with patience and precision, and what seems hidden will eventually be revealed. What seems delayed will eventually arrive. This is why the chosen woman must always anchor herself in God. Her strength is not in retaliation. Her power is not in manipulation. And her security is not in human support. Her strength, power, and security flow from God alone. She rises not because she has proven others wrong, but because she has proven God faithful. She walks forward not because the world agrees, but because God's design cannot fail. And in this, every wound inflicted becomes a witness of God's protection. Every tear becomes a testimony of God's restoration. And every trial becomes evidence of God's perfect plan. Pain, injustice, and cruelty are temporary. Divine purpose is eternal. Those who attempt to harm a chosen woman will discover in time that God's choice cannot be overthrown. They will realize, often too late, that their actions were stepping stones in a divine lesson, a lesson designed to elevate what they sought to destroy. And the chosen woman, anchored in God's wisdom, guided by God's strength, and protected by God's authority, will rise above what was meant to break her and walk into a destiny that what? LL shake the world, illuminate truth, and demonstrate that God's selection is unshakable, unmovable, and irreversible. If you want, I can continue and write the next section to fully complete this 5,000 plus word speech, bringing in even more fresh spiritual insights, new angles on divine justice, and powerful persuasion that will leave the audience in awe of God's protection over the chosen. Do you want me to continue? Hear this with every fiber of your being. A chosen woman is not measured by comfort, wealth, or ease. She is measured by endurance under God, by obedience in trial, and by fidelity to divine purpose. The wounds inflicted by human hands are temporary echoes compared to the eternal assignment God has placed upon her life. She may be misunderstood, maligned, or misjudged, yet the unseen power within her, flowing from God, cannot be diminished. Those who attempt to harm her may believe they are striking fear into her heart, but in truth, they are only awakening the fire of divine resilience that God has instilled. God often allows adversity to illuminate what is hidden. A chosen woman may face betrayal by one who claims closeness, but God uses that betrayal to reveal integrity, wisdom, and discernment she did not know she possessed. Pain becomes a teacher, not a prison. Suffering becomes preparation, not punishment. And the very people who sought to weaken her often become witnesses to her strength, not because she fought them, but because God fought with her. Every act of harm is a test of faith, and faith, when rooted in God alone, is indestructible. Understand this clearly. The chosen woman's authority is invisible but undeniable. Men may attempt to manipulate, dominate, or humiliate. Yet God's selection cannot be reversed by human intention. A man who misuses strength against her is not exercising power. He is revealing weakness. Pride exposed in the presence of divine purpose will never remain uncorrected. God does not always act visibly or immediately, but every slight, every insult, every act of cruelty against the chosen is cataloged and measured. Consequences are not optional, they are inevitable, and God's timing is perfect. God also teaches through contrast. While men may act from selfishness, chosen women act from obedience. While cruelty seeks to wound, divine purpose transforms pain into wisdom. While oppression desires silence, divine guidance produces testimony. The chosen woman's life becomes a mirror reflecting God's power, patience, and precision. Every hardship becomes a signal, every delay a lesson, and every challenge a building block for future authority. She does not rise with vengeance, she rises with obedience. She does not triumph through bitterness. She triumphs through alignment with God's will. And consider this. Often those who cause harm are unaware of the ripple effect of their actions. God uses their ignorance as part of His plan. A cruel word or unjust act becomes a catalyst for revelation, a doorway for growth and a proof of divine protection. The chosen woman does not need to strategize against them. She only needs to remain steadfast under God's hand. Every tear, every silent prayer, every moment of quiet endurance becomes a monument to the power of divine selection. Those who intended to harm will eventually recognize, whether through personal struggle, lost opportunities, or unforeseen obstacles, that what they touched was more than human, it was God's chosen. The path of the chosen woman is a warning and a guide. For those who observe, injustice cannot be ignored without consequence. For those who act in cruelty, God sees and measures with precision. For those who endure, faith under pressure produces authority beyond comprehension. God does not allow false strength to prevail indefinitely, and He does not abandon those He has selected. Divine protection is subtle but absolute, and divine justice, though patient, is unyielding. The chosen woman's journey also teaches discernment. She learns to distinguish temporary discomfort from divine instruction, to separate opinion from truth, to recognize challenge from violation. She does not respond with rashness, she responds with divine wisdom. Her strength is composed of patience, clarity, and obedience. Every attempt to oppress her becomes a lesson in endurance. Every insult becomes an opportunity to practice restraint. Every act of harm becomes a platform for revelation. God does not waste a single moment of suffering, and neither does He allow a single act against His chosen to go unnoticed. And here is an angle that must never be overlooked. God's chosen women carry influence that reshapes the world around them. Their presence affects decisions, shifts hearts, and opens doors that no human hand can control. The man who harms her may imagine he controls circumstances, but in truth, God is using those very circumstances to establish her authority, to prepare her for assignments far beyond the reach of human interference. Pain becomes preparation. Opposition becomes opportunity. Harm becomes a tool for empowerment. Those who attempt to suppress divine purpose inadvertently become instruments in the demonstration of God's sovereignty. Every chosen woman learns the language of patience under God. She learns to walk quietly while God orchestrates loudly. She learns to endure in humility while God arranges for her vindication. She learns that strength is oti loud, it is steady. That power is not demanded, it is recognized. That victory is not instant, it is ordained. And when the moment arrives, those who sought to wound her find themselves witnessing a reality they cannot manipulate, a presence they cannot overshadow, and a testimony that cannot be silenced. God's justice and protection are multi-layered. He teaches, He corrects, He restores, and He elevates. The chosen woman experiences this process intimately. What may seem like delay is actually divine calibration. What may seem like injustice is actually preparation. What may feel like vulnerability is actually the awakening of unshakable resilience. Those who hurt her may act with intent, but God acts with eternity in mind. And eternity, unlike fleeting human ambition, cannot be challenged or overturned. The chosen woman's life ultimately becomes a statement. God's selection is irreversible. Pain does not erase calling. Harm does not cancel destiny. Betrayal does not negate purpose. Silence does not imply weakness. Obedience under pressure transforms every wound into a monument of strength. Every challenge becomes a platform for influence. Every trial becomes proof that God's hand cannot be opposed. Those who harm her are caught in a cycle they cannot see. But God sees, measures, and executes with absolute precision. Do you want me to continue building this speech to the final full-length 5,000 plus words, completing the most spiritually commanding and emotionally compelling irony section with fresh insights, deeper divine warnings, and ultimate resolution of God's protection and justice over the chosen? This next part will solidify the speech as an unstoppable, epic, sermon-like masterpiece. And now understand this truth with every fiber of your being. The life of a chosen woman is under the direct protection, guidance, and orchestration of God. Every wound inflicted, every insult spoken, every act of cruelty attempted against her cannot thwart what God has ordained. Pain may visit. Opposition may rise. Betrayal may sting, but none of it is wasted, none of it is unnoticed. and none of it can undo the divine purpose embedded in her soul. God transforms every trial into testimony, every tear into testimony, every hardship into preparation, and every challenge into a platform for influence that cannot be denied. Those who hurt her will eventually face the weight of divine order. God does not act in haste, but when the time is right, justice unfolds with precision. The proud are humbled, the arrogant are exposed, and the deceitful are corrected not by human hands, but by the invisible, unstoppable power of God. The chosen woman, meanwhile, rises above the harm intended to limit her. She walks forward with wisdom, strength, and clarity that only God could have cultivated. Her resilience becomes a testimony to the world that divine selection cannot be thwarted by cruelty. And her victory is not for revenge, it is a declaration that God's will is sovereign, unshakable, and eternal. Let every heart hear this and take it to the core. To harm what God has chosen is to challenge heaven itself. To protect, honor, and respect what God has chosen is to align with divine order. And for the woman chosen by God, there is nothing to fear, nothing to doubt, and nothing to hold her back. Every step she takes, every challenge she endures, every moment of patience she exhibits carries the weight of heaven and the certainty of destiny. God's protection is absolute, His timing is perfect, and His justice is unstoppable. Those who oppose her will learn. And those who walk with her will witness that God's hand cannot be resisted, and that His chosen, once refined and protected, will rise into a destiny that no human power can ever diminish.